Sometimes your soul feels tight, your heart feels squeezed, you cannot breathe. Depression, anxiety, obsessions, and the same fear again and again. The worst will happen. But now, stop for a moment. What if these feelings are not only a psychological problem? What if Allah is telling you something through this pressure? In this video, we will ask these questions. How does Islam explain this darkness? How did the great Islamic scholars understand fear and waswasa? What do the Quran and Hadith show as a way out of these bad feelings? If you are living like this, you are not alone. This video is for you. You are watching Religious Story TV. Subscribe now so you do not miss it. Like the video. Support us with your comments. This way, more people will feel less alone. If you are ready, let's begin. One of the heaviest burdens of this age is the tightness that settles inside a person, a pressure they cannot clearly describe. Sometimes it is called depression, sometimes anxiety. Sometimes it comes out as the sentence, "I feel like I am suffocating." From the outside, everything may look fine. There is a job, there are opportunities, there are plans, maybe respect, maybe people around. But if there is a place inside where the breath becomes tight, then after a while that crowd, those opportunities, and that good-looking life are not enough. When you first talk about this, some people say, "This will pass." Some say, "Take a vacation." Some say, "It will get better with time." Others immediately talk about medicine and therapy. And yes, for some people, professional help is necessary. This cannot be ignored. But there is another question here. In the same world, under very similar conditions, with similar tiredness, why do some people not fall into spiritual depression while others enter it so easily? This question brings us to a very basic point. Is the tightness of the soul caused only by the weight of life, or does weakness in faith also have a serious role? From the outside, it is thought like this. When you buy a house, you will relax. When you have a car, you will find peace. When the debt ends, you will breathe. When you get married, everything will settle. When your job becomes stable, the unrest inside will end. These plans come true one by one, but the does not end. Sometimes a person feels even more trapped exactly when they find what they were looking for. They have more, but feel less relief. The strange thing is that the person then gets angry at themselves and says, "What is still missing in my life?" Because everyone outside says, "This is an enviable life." But at night, that person feels like tearing their clothes apart. Somewhere inside, something is tightening. Right at this point, a sentence from Bediüzzaman's book appears. It is not harsh, but it is clear enough to touch the heart. Sometimes you cannot settle in the world, like a man whose throat is being squeezed in a prison. Even though you say, and want a place wider than the world. You enter and settle into a tiny thing, a small task, a memory, a single minute. While your soul wants the eternal realm, you get caught by tiny worldly desires. This is a very familiar picture. A person says, "The world feels too narrow for me," but then falls into a memory and cannot get out. A word, a moment, a mistake, a regret, 1 minute, and they suffocate inside that minute. Even someone who travels from country to country carries their memories like a suitcase. Because the issue is not the size of the body. A body of 2 meters can fit into the world, but the soul cannot. The part of a person that cannot settle in the world is the soul. So far this sounds like diagnosis, but the main question is this: why does the soul not fit? Because inside a human being, there is not only flesh and bones. Inside, there are spiritual faculties, what we call latifas. In one sense, abilities. In another sense, spiritual organs. And these organs are like seeds. A seed is small, but a huge tree comes out of it, with branches, leaves, and fruits. That means inside a seed there is the potential to grow, open, rise, and give taste. Now think about this. When a seed stays under the soil, it lives in a narrow place. If it meets water, it cracks, sprouts, and becomes a tree. If it does not meet water, it survives for a while, but eventually rots and mixes with the soil. The spiritual organs of a human being are like this. They exist, but they need to open. If they do not open, lack of duty begins, and lack of duty squeezes a person from the inside. Here, a very striking example comes in: a child at home with nothing to do. If they have no task, they get bored and mess up the house. Then the mother cannot stand it and gives the child a tablet. The tablet quiets the child, but this is not a real solution. It only distracts. The same thing happens to adults. Even a game can distract a person. Someone can sink into a game so deeply that they stay awake for 35 to 40 hours. Worldly entertainment, movies, games, books numb the soul for a while, but when the numbness passes, it starts again. Because you move your body around, but your soul is still hungry. You travel from country to country, eat meal after meal, wear new clothes, but after a while you feel tight again. So distracting the body does not feed the soul. So what feeds the soul? Inside the soul there is a seed designed to become a tree. If that seed meets the right water, it will give fruit. What does fruit mean? It means taste. This taste does not resemble worldly pleasures. When Yunus Emre says, "I do not need the world, I only need you," it sounds like poetry, but according to what is described here, this is a lived truth. Because the one who tastes that pleasure is not comforted by anything else. The Sahaba lived under hard material conditions, and the trials were heavy, but there was a happiness inside them, because their latifas had developed, found their duty, and given their fruits. Now let us return to the beginning. Why is spiritual tightness so common in modern people? Because the latifas stay inside like seeds, but they do not meet water. The spiritual organs remain without duty, and something that has no duty squeezes a person. That is why even someone who looks like everything is complete from the outside says, "Ugh," because the soul is looking for what belongs to it. And when it cannot find it, it sounds the alarm. Now let us go a little deeper, because what we call tightness of the soul is not a problem seen on the surface. There is a mechanism working underneath, and if this mechanism is not understood, a person keeps trying to repair themselves from the wrong place. The raw material of the soul is Bekadir, meaning eternity. The soul cannot be fully satisfied with what is temporary. No matter how much is given, there is a taste until it is reached. Once it is reached, emptiness begins. That is why worldly pleasures start to exhaust a person the moment they become the goal. Sometimes Allah even allows the very thing a person says, "I will be happy with this," to fail, so that it does not save them. Because when a person makes happiness with something other than Allah their main purpose, the soul becomes even more trapped. Worldly happiness gives joy until it is reached. After it is reached, the soul becomes hungry again. That is why even forbidden things are attractive until they are reached. Once they are reached, they become empty. Because the soul has gone to the wrong door, and the pains that are suffered have the exact opposite effect of pleasures that are tasted. They strengthen the soul, expand it, and cause it to rise to higher levels. Yes, sometimes oppression forces a person to leave their place, to make hijrah, and to gain many things. If Prophet Ibrahim had lived comfortably in Urfa, if he had not been thrown into the fire, if he had not been oppressed, perhaps he would not have become the Ibrahim alayhi salam that we know today. Because faith does not grow in comfortable soil. Faith always needs pressure. Here, the relationship between the seed and the soil becomes important. A seed, no matter how valuable it is on its own, does not give fruit unless it enters the soil. And it is not enough for it to enter the soil. It must be buried in darkness. Weight must be placed on it. It must crack. It must suffer. Only then does it become a tree. Faith is like this. Faith alone is not enough. Faith does not give fruit unless it meets ikhlas. Ikhlas means pure, clean, without calculation, not mixed with anything else. The more faith a person has, the more ikhlas they have. The more ikhlas they have, the more sincere they are. For ikhlas to grow, snakes must bite and scorpions must sting the body. Without these, unfortunately, the human soul does not mature. If the human soul cannot rise through faith, pain brings two disasters to the person. The first is greed. It becomes something the person runs after to numb the soul, like a drug. They want more everywhere and in everything. This creates constant distraction, and its end is always dissatisfaction and a much greater pain. The second is fear. A person constantly thinks about all possible bad scenarios that could happen and fears them. An obsession forms. They struggle to make decisions. Fixations appear. The person becomes unable to enjoy life in this world, and constant negative thoughts turn their inner world into hell. Let us say this very clearly. If a person is greedy, they cannot have ikhlas. If a person is afraid, they cannot have ikhlas. Because ikhlas means that nothing other than Allah is at the center. In greed, the center is the world. In fear, the center is again the world. Ikhlas does not put the world at the center. Love of the world is the root of all evil. Why? Because love of the world feeds tamah. And where there is tamah, there is no ikhlas. What we call greed does not come from need. This is very important. A person who truly has needs is not greedy. A greedy person is someone whose soul is not satisfied. The soul starts looking for paradise in this world, and when it cannot find it, it wants more. That is why a person can feel unhappy even when they do not lack anything. Because the issue is not money, it is comparison. Happiness becomes tied to being ahead of others. This destroys ikhlas completely. Life turns into a race, and there is no peace in a race. So how does a person escape from this? There are two ways. Either Allah gives worldly means, and the person sees them as a trust and lives with gratitude, or Allah limits those means, and the person lives with patience and surrender. In both cases there is salvation, but the center must be Allah. If Allah is not at the center of a person's life, they have a house, it is not enough. They have a car, it is not enough. They have status, it is not enough. They are praised, it is still not enough. Because the issue is not having. The issue is what they are trying to fill with what they have. Most of the time, a person does not notice their own greed, because they decorate it with nice words. They call it hard work. They call it ambition. They call it determination. But deep inside, a voice whispers, "Others should not be ahead of me." This sentence is the one that squeezes the throat of ikhlas. Remember Qarun. Qarun was not only rich. Qarun was someone who saw himself as the reason for his wealth. He said, "I gained this through my own knowledge." Do not think this sentence stayed in the past. Today it is said even louder. I work day and night. I am smart. I took risks. I deserved it. So let us ask, where did you get your intelligence from? Who gave you your days and nights? Who placed the courage in you to take risks? Who protected your health during that time? When a person says, "I did it," they push Allah out of their life. This may not be open denial, but it is a hidden break. And this break rots ikhlas from the inside. This is where greed steps in, because greed takes a person away from gratitude. When gratitude goes, ikhlas also goes. What happens when ikhlas is gone? a person still worships, but it becomes empty inside. A person still does good deeds, but they start seeing themselves. A person still says Allah, but the center is the world. And the most dangerous part is this: the person does not realize it. Because Tama is sneaky. It strikes from behind like a snake. Is there real need? No. But there is ego. There is a need to show off. There is a desire to be superior. You pass one person, another appears. You reach one goal. A new goal is born. The soul cannot rest. That is why Tama makes a person constantly tired. But this tiredness is not in the body, it is in the heart. So why does this hunger never end? Because the soul is being fed at the wrong table. The food of the soul is not money. The food of the soul is not applause. The food of the soul is not superiority. The food of the soul is a bond with Allah. A person who looks for paradise in this world attacks the world. When they cannot find it, they attack even more. The solution is the awareness of trust. Either Allah gives you means and you see them as a trust and live with gratitude, or Allah narrows those means and you live with patience. In both cases, the center is Allah. In the heart, either Allah grows or the world grows. They do not grow at the same time. And now we must honestly ask ourselves this: what is my happiness tied to? To having something? Or can I say, He is there even when I do not have it? Fear is one of the easiest feelings for a person to notice, but one of the hardest to truly recognize, because fear often disguises itself as logic, caution, or reason. I am not afraid. I am being careful. I am not panicking. I am being realistic. I am not anxious. I am being smart. But the fear we call hides exactly behind these sentences. Here we need to make a very important distinction. The fear we are talking about is not the fear you feel when a car suddenly comes toward you. It is not the instinct to protect yourself from immediate danger. The fear we are talking about is this: fearing the world instead of Allah. This fear is the second great poison that eats away ikhlas from the inside. In a Qudsi hadith, Allah says, I do not combine two fears in one heart, and I do not combine two securities in one heart. What does this mean? A person who fears for their akhirah in this world will be safe in the akhirah. But a person who feels completely safe in this world will face fear in the akhirah. The fear mentioned here is not panic. It is awareness of accountability. There are some people who cannot sleep at night. They think, what will happen in the grave? They feel tight inside and ask, how will I stand before Allah? But worldly problems cannot truly crush their hearts. They are not drowned by worldly troubles. They do not fall into depression. These people are safe in the akhirah. In this world, they are under Allah's unseen protection. Even if disasters happen to them, even if the world explodes like a bomb, they do not collapse inside because their focus is on the akhirah, not the world, but those who live as if there is no akhirah at all, those who only laugh, entertain themselves, and stay distracted. They will face fear in the akhirah, and even in this world, they will feel the fears of the things they chase. They will fear loss. They will fear not reaching their goals. They will fear rejection, especially from people they chase through haram paths, and this will increase their fear even more. This is a very clear law of balance. Fear enters a person's life wearing different clothes, sometimes through a spouse, sometimes through a child, sometimes through work, sometimes through health, sometimes through illness, sometimes through an accident. And most of the time a person says, why did this happen to me? But very few people ask, what is Allah trying to show me through this event? If Allah squeezed the heart directly, a person would rebel. So Allah sends this tightness through veils, through a person, through an event, through a loss. Each of these is a guest, and every guest brings a message. That is why we should not act badly toward these fears, because they have a duty. They deliver their message, and then leave. Right here, there is a sentence that keeps a person standing. This too shall pass. This sentence is not just comfort. It is a truth. Nothing stays forever. Not pain, not joy, not fear. Only Allah remains. Sometimes a person thinks, this fear destroyed me. No, this fear came to wake you up. Because if fear did not exist, a person would not run toward Allah. Let us be honest. When everything is going well, how much do we really seek refuge in Allah? Fear forces a person to run, but the direction matters. If you fear the world and run to the world, you drown. If you fear the world and run to Allah, you are saved. This is where tawakkul comes in. Tawakkul does not mean leaving precautions. Tawakkul means leaving the result to Allah. When events look uncontrolled, fear increases. But in a heart that knows events are under Allah's control, fear turns into calmness. Think of it like this. You walk outside. On one corner there is someone with a gun. On the other side, someone with a knife. Another person is shouting. You feel fear. But what if you see a camera on the corner? You say, they are filming a movie. You relax because now there is a script. Qadar is like this. The moment you say, all of this is coming from Allah's decree, relief enters the heart. But what does modern man say? No. Everything is uncontrolled. Everything is random. This thought is the root of fear. That is why Allah sometimes sends events that shake all of humanity. Like a virus, like a crisis, like a disaster. Who could remain unaffected? Who could continue living as if death did not exist? Sometimes these painful events knock the fake pacifier out of a person's mouth, and the person begins to search for real nourishment. But those who do not turn to Allah after fear experience fear in a much worse way. They run away from their closest friend. They cannot even draw close to their spouse. Fear that does not bring a person closer to Allah is the most dangerous kind of fear. Most of our fears related to this world are unnecessary, and these unnecessary fears damage trust in Allah. When a person loses trust in Allah, they cling more tightly to the world, and here a very dangerous break happens. If there is fear, Ikhlas is damaged. If Ikhlas is damaged, Iman is wounded. That is why fear is not only a psychological issue, it is an itikadi issue. If a person believes they are left on their own, they also think the universe is uncontrolled. Then they fear the stars, they fear the sun, they fear the future. But a person who knows they are a servant of Allah also knows the universe is the property of Allah. And that heart stands firm despite everything. The most hidden form of fear is the fear of falling in the eyes of others. This fear is more dangerous than open fears because it does not come like the sound of a weapon. It whispers quietly. What will they say if I speak now? Will I be misunderstood? Will they judge me? What if I am left alone? This is the door that Shaitan loves the most. Because this fear looks like it does not cut a person off from Allah, but it slowly pulls them away from the truth. Look carefully. Shaitan never starts by saying, deny Allah. That would be too rough. It would not work. His plan is more subtle. He sees, but acts as if he did not see. He hears, but stays silent. This is Shaitan's real target, because this break is not noticed from the outside, but it rots a person from the inside. Shaitan especially targets people who serve the truth, because one person standing firm supports thousands. One person falling shakes thousands. That is why the fear nerve is scratched the most in such people. They are frightened with wealth. They are frightened with property. They are frightened with reputation. They are frightened with being blamed. And look, the Quran sets a very clear measure here. In Surah Maida, Allah says, they struggle in the path of Allah and do not fear the blame of those who blame. This verse exists to extinguish the fear nerve. When you read this verse, do you know who comes to mind? Maryam. Think about it. You are holding a baby in your arms. You have no husband. You are standing in front of society. and Allah tells you, "Go and face the people." What a test this is. Think of their looks, think of their whispers, think of their accusations. But what did Maryam do? She walked in silence. She did what Allah commanded. She looked to her Lord, not to those who blamed her. This is ikhlas. Ikhlas is embracing the truth without fear. Is it hard? Yes, very hard. The road is harsh, friends are disloyal, enemies are strong, but there is no other path. Truth cannot be carried halfway. Either it is carried fully, or it is abandoned. Let me give an example. Once, CDS were prepared with talks about Iman. They spoke about Salah. They spoke about Itikad. They spoke about the existence of Allah. Thousands of CDs were printed and distributed to shops one by one. In just the first few shops, harsh reactions came. Insults were thrown. The CDs were broken and thrown away. Do you know what a person feels at that moment? All enthusiasm disappears. All hope breaks. This is exactly what Shaitan wants. Look, he says, do not continue. It is not worth it. But they continued, hundreds, thousands of shops. And when they look back later, the number of negative incidents was only 2. But do you know what happened? Some people started praying, some people saved their Iman, some people turned toward the Quran. Shaitan's plan is always the same. First, frighten, then cut off the good. But behind the first difficulties, the gifts of Ar-Rahman are hidden. If the fear nerve works, a person pulls back. And at this point, something very painful happens. A person looks like they are standing with the truth, but in reality, they have stepped aside. This is abandonment of service. What you think you gain by fear will protect you neither in this world nor in the Akhirah. So let us say this clearly. Walking on the path of Allah has a cost, but that cost is not heavier than fear. What is truly heavy is staying silent while knowing the truth. Fear does not only tighten the heart, fear also isolates a person. And this is the biggest epidemic of the modern world, loneliness. Look carefully. This loneliness is not about being physically alone. It is lived among people. It grows inside noise, but it kills quietly. We have reached such a point that even in countries at the peak of material progress, people have created a ministry of loneliness because they cannot keep up with suicides. Pay attention. Not an association, not a committee, a ministry. What does this mean? It means the human heart can no longer find a branch to hold on to in this world. People have everything, but they have no one. They go everywhere, but they belong nowhere, because if the truth of the Akhirah does not exist, the world turns into a meaningless waiting room. And in a waiting room, a person becomes impatient, anxious, afraid. That is why fear is not only a personal feeling, it is a sign of social collapse. When Allah wants to warn a person, He does not always strike with a blow. Sometimes He shakes. When a person starts saying, everything is out of control, as happens today, the heart collapses. But the moment a person says, there is a writer of this scenario, the heart begins to breathe. Remember what we said at the beginning. There is chaos in the street, weapons, shouting, danger. You feel fear. But what happens if you see a camera? You say, they are filming a movie. You relax, because now there is a plan. Qadar is exactly like this. A person who thinks events are random is afraid of everything. But a person who knows events are under Allah's control stands firm with tawakkul. Otherwise, panic begins. Anxiety begins. Uncertainty produces fear. Meaning brings calm. If a person thinks they are left on their own, they think the universe is left on its own. But a person who knows they are a servant of Allah knows the universe is the property of Allah. And that heart stands upright despite everything. So let us say this clearly, life is never hopeless. But if fear did not exist, most of us would not run to Allah. Fear is not an enemy. If read correctly, it is a guide. But if fear sits at the center, it pushes a person into loneliness, and loneliness pushes them into destruction. Ikhlas is carrying the truth without fear. Ikhlas is accepting blame if necessary. Ikhlas is not losing direction even if the world collapses. Is it hard? Yes. But this path is not the path of comfort. This path is the path of the awakened. And remember, if fear is tightening you, this is not a punishment. It may be Allah's way of calling you back to Himself. And sometimes, a person's salvation begins exactly where they feel the most trapped. Now we are walking toward the heart of the matter, because everything explained here eventually connects to a single center. This is the real key point of tightness of the soul, inner pressure, and those constant ugh feelings. Without understanding this point, nothing we discussed in the previous sections fully falls into place. The same person can carry very heavy burdens, yet collapse over something very small. They can endure a mountain-like problem, but cannot endure a single word, a memory, or a look. The reason for this is that the latifas inside a person have different sensitivities. Some spiritual organs are like the head. They carry weight, endure, and remain patient. But some are like the eye. They can take in worlds, but when something as small as an eyelash touches them, they close. The name of this eye-like latifa is Latifa-e Rabbaniya. What we commonly call the heart. The heart is not just a piece of flesh. The heart is a spiritual center. It is the center from which all other latifas are fed and find direction. Now pay close attention. The eye takes in the world in a single glance. The sky, stars, the sea. But when something as small as a hair falls into it, it closes. Pain begins. Vision stops. Latifa-e Rabbaniya is the same. With the side that looks toward the akhirah, eternity and Allah, it can contain worlds. But when a tiny worldly benefit, a moment of heedlessness, or a small attachment touches it from the side that looks to the world, it closes. And then the person says, "My soul feels tight. I feel pressure inside. I cannot sleep. I cannot enjoy anything." What actually happened is this: something that does not look toward the akhirah touched the eye of the heart. Here there is a very subtle but vital point. A person often thinks, "I did not commit a big sin. I did not seriously harm anyone. Nothing really happened." But sometimes a word, sometimes a look, sometimes a memory, sometimes a small worldly gain touches Latifa-e Rabbaniya like a hair. And at that moment, the eye closes. That is why some people get stuck in a past event. They cannot stop thinking about that memory, yet their real capacity is far greater than that memory. But when the eye of the heart closes, a person drowns in that tiny thing. A heart that could normally hold worlds becomes trapped inside a single minute. Now let us ask a very important question. Why is the heart so sensitive? Because its raw material is not the world. Its raw material is baka, meaning eternity. The world is temporary, passing, limited. That is why when the heart looks toward the world, it feels heaviness. When it looks toward the akhirah, it finds relief. Worldly matters sometimes create a weight on the heart. This is what the text calls spiritual weight. Sometimes a word weighs nothing physically, but it has spiritual weight. Sometimes an image lasts 1 second, but it locks the heart. Sometimes a single bite is small, but it darkens the heart. The person does not realize this. They say, "Why do I feel tight?" They do not search for the cause. Then they look for the solution in the wrong place. Here the text gives a warning that is very strong, but also very merciful. Sometimes a latifa fades and dies. Now let us stop here and separate two things. Being wounded is one thing. Dying completely is another. A wounded latifa causes pain, but it is still alive. A dead latifa can no longer feel pleasure. That is why some people say, "I pray, but there is no taste. I attend lessons, but I feel sleepy." I read the Quran, but I get bored. Here is a very critical diagnosis. The problem is not the prayer. The problem is not the lesson. The problem is not the Quran. The problem is that the spiritual tongue that feels taste is wounded. The text explains this with a striking example. If you give the best dessert to a man whose tongue is cut with a razor, he will say, "I cannot taste it." Is the dessert at fault? No. The problem is the tongue. The same applies to spiritual life. If Latifa-i Rabbaniya is wounded, even the most beautiful worship causes pain. It can even feel disturbing. And what does the person do? They say, "This means it is not for me. This path is not suitable for me." They make a wrong diagnosis. But what must be done is clear: rehabilitation. A leg that stays in a cast for 1 month loses muscle. To return to its old strength, it needs months or even years of work. Spiritual latifas are the same. They are neglected for a time. They are fed incorrectly for a time. Then the person asks, "Why is the old taste gone?" But this does not heal quickly. It requires willpower, persistence, patience. And here there is a very clear sentence. I command myself to pray. I command myself to attend lessons. I command my nafs. Meaning this is not about feeling like it. The desire does not come. The latifa is wounded. The will must step in. But the real danger is this. If the latifa fades and dies, the matter becomes much more difficult. A dead latifa no longer feels discomfort in wrongdoing. A person lies and the conscience does not ache. They backbite and feel nothing. They commit haram and feel no shame. This is the face that looks toward the world. The face that looks toward the Akhirah is even more frightening. Not being able to taste. Watching others enjoy blessings, but being unable to feel them. That is why this world is a nursery. Latifas grow here. The Akhirah is the place of harvest. What does not grow here remains deficient there. And right at this point, the true seriousness of tightness of the soul becomes clear. This is not only about feeling good today. This is about a matter that concerns the eternal capacity of the human being. Now we are crossing a very critical threshold. Until now, we talked about what is happening. Now it is time to talk about how it happens. This question can no longer be postponed. If a person knows that their heart is tightening, why do they still turn toward the very things that tighten the heart? This question may seem simple, but its answer directly opens the inner structure of the human being. A latifa does only two things. It either feels pleasure or it feels pain. There is no third option. It cannot stay empty. It cannot remain suspended. A latifa either does its duty and produces pleasure, or it stays without duty and produces pain. What we call tightness of the soul is often the voice of latifas that have started producing pain. The person wants to silence this voice, but they choose the wrong method to silence it. Here, two very important concepts enter the picture. Kuve-i Shahika and Kuve-i Saika. These are spiritual forces that manage a person's choosing mechanism. Kuve-i Shahika, the force that makes you say, "I want this." Kuve-i Saika, the force that makes you choose it among alternatives. One pushes you into action, the other gives direction. When a person turns towards something, this is not random. Even what you call "I just felt like it" is actually the result of a latifa that is either working correctly or is damaged. Now pay close attention. If these two forces are healthy, a person wants the right thing at the right time. But if these forces are wounded, the person wants the wrong thing at the wrong time and chooses in the wrong way. That is why some people make choices that destroy them and still say, "It just came from inside me." In reality, what came from inside is not a healthy inner voice. It is the scream of a wounded latifa. A person may refuse what is placed in front of them. This is freedom. But when they choose something, they often cannot explain why they chose it. A person chooses marriage like this. They choose a job like this. They choose a lifestyle like this. And then years pass. And they say, why did I do this? Because the latifa that was active at the moment of choice had not been rehabilitated. Here we must say this clearly. The problem of a person who experiences tightness of the soul is not just feeling sad. The problem is a habit of choosing wrongly. Latifas fed with wrong things want wrong things. Latifas that want wrong things build wrong lives. And then the person suffocates inside the life they built. Remember, Latifa-e Rabbaniye is like the eye. It can take in worlds, but it closes from something as small as an eyelash. A person usually says, "It is just once. It is a small thing. Do not exaggerate." But the heart does not work like that. The heart does not calculate small or big. The heart calculates direction. Does that small thing take you toward Allah, or does it bury you in the world? If it buries you in the world, it pierces the eye of the heart. Here a very dangerous process begins. Ghafla is not ignorance. Ghafla is choosing knowingly, leaving diamonds that will be given later in exchange for tiny pleasures, knowingly preferring the temporary over the permanent. As this choice is repeated, the eye of the heart takes blow after blow, one blow, another blow, another blow. What happens in the end? Sometimes it fades and dies. If Latifa-e Rabbaniya dies, a person can no longer feel pleasure in worship. Only habit remains, only form remains, only acting as if remains. And then these sentences appear: prayer gives me nothing. Lessons feel empty. These things do not attract me. At this point, we must make a very critical distinction. The person who says this is not saying it because they are bad. Most of the time, they are saying it because they are wounded. But the danger is this. If they do not accept that they are wounded, if they say, "This is just how I am," if they do not enter rehabilitation, the wound moves toward death. A wounded latifa can heal. A dead latifa is very difficult. That is why we insist on this point. Willpower must step in. The excuse, "I do not feel like it," is invalid here, because not feeling like it is already a symptom of the problem. A person must say to their latifas with their will, "This is your duty. I will force you to do it." Just as physical therapy hurts but heals, spiritual rehabilitation is difficult but revives. Here, something becomes very clear. Tightness of the soul is not something to escape from. It is a sign that must be read correctly. This sign says, "I am being fed wrongly. I am not doing my duty. My center has shifted." And if this sign is suppressed with medicine, entertainment, or distraction, the latifa becomes even weaker. Now we are finally reaching the core of the solution. Everything explained so far was a diagnosis. This section explains the treatment mechanism directly. But let me say this clearly from the start. This is not a "do this and it will immediately pass" recipe. This is a roadmap that rebuilds a person's inner structure. The permanent solution to tightness of the soul is not hidden in a single behavior, but in 4 basic forces working together. These 4 forces are will, mind, emotion, Latifa-e Rabbaniye, heart. If one of these works weakly, the system limps. If 2 are weak, the person loses balance. When all 4 work together, even the heaviest conditions cannot break a person. Now let us move forward step by step without separating them. 1. Will. The center of resistance. Will is the place where a person says, "I am doing this." But will does not grow by itself. Will grows through worship. Why? Because worship teaches the will this: you can do it even when you do not feel like it. The biggest problem of a person who experiences tightness of the soul is this: they measure everything by the scale of, "Do I feel like it?" But will is a force that must step in exactly where desire is absent. If will does not work, a person becomes a copy of yesterday. Today is the same, tomorrow is the same. And here is a striking truth. If the will is weak, latifas can never be rehabilitated, because rehabilitation is demanding. Without will, no spiritual wound heals. 2. Mind, the area fed by Marifatullah. The mind is the place where you know, but knowledge alone is not enough. If the mind is not fed by Marifatullah, meaning knowing Allah, a person cannot understand why they endure hardship. That is why good intention alone is not enough. A person must know why they are patient. They must know why they make sacrifices. They must know why they should not cling to this world. If there is no knowledge, the will gets tired very quickly. That is why repeating these lessons is not pointless. The mind forgets. The world constantly whispers other things. If the mind is not fed, the voice of the world becomes dominant. 3. Emotion, the feeling revived by Muhabbatullah. Emotion is the place where you love, but if emotion is not controlled, it becomes the most dangerous area. If emotion is not purified by Muhabbatullah, love of Allah, it fills with hostility, jealousy, anger, and hatred. And here is a very powerful measure. A person who says, "I love Allah," but feels hatred toward Muslims, does not have Muhabbatullah, because love of Allah produces love for people. If emotions are not purified, the heart tightens. When the heart tightens, the soul sounds the alarm. Part of tightness of the soul comes from here, emotions that are fed wrongly. 4. Latifa-i-Rabbani, the center, the key, the heart. Now we come to the main point. Latifa-i-Rabbani is the center where the other three forces meet. The will works, the mind knows, the emotion loves. But if the heart does not connect them, everything is wasted. The heart has one main duty, to connect the visible world with the unseen world. What does this mean? A person sees objects, but the heart must see the asma behind the objects. A person who sees objects but does not see the asma behind them starves their heart. They meet blessings every day, but their heart is not fed. This situation is described in the text as spiritual suicide. So what feeds the heart? Mushahadatullah, meaning Allah sees me. This thing I see is a manifestation of Him. I am in His presence. This awareness feeds the heart. This is where the verse gains meaning. Only with the remembrance of Allah do hearts find peace. The heart here is not flesh. It is Latifa-i-Rabbani, putting it all together. Tightness of the soul is a sign that the will has weakened. The mind is not being fed, the emotions are mixed, the heart is not connecting with the asma. When these four begin to work together, what happens? A person who lives these 4 steps cannot collapse, even in the heaviest moment. Final question. Now we need to stop here and honestly ask ourselves, when my soul feels tight, am I truly searching for a solution? Or am I just trying to silence the pain? Because silencing is easy, but reviving requires sacrifice. Is tightness of the soul only a problem, or is it also a proof? This endless hunger inside a human being, this dissatisfaction, this feeling of it is not enough, is a living Tawheed proof pointing to the existence and oneness of Allah. Let us open this slowly. A human wants everything in this world. They want a beautiful house. They want a good spouse. They want peace. They want health. They want appreciation. They want to be loved. And they obtain some of these. But then what happens? After a while, the same sentence appears again. Something is missing. This sentence is very valuable because it does not come from a lie a person tells themselves. It comes from creation itself. If a human were created only for this world, the world would satisfy them. But it does not. So this means the human scale is not the scale of the world. This is a very simple but very strong logic. A key opens only the lock it belongs to. A battery works only when placed in the correct device. The human heart is the same. When placed in the wrong place, it does not work. When directed to the wrong goal, it becomes tired. The heart's desire for eternity is not meaningless. This desire is not a coincidence. This desire is a compass reminding the human of their true homeland. That is why even people who are deeply attached to the world sometimes feel tight without a clear reason, because the heart senses that it has set up camp in the wrong place. The heart is a guest in this world. It feels tight where it mistakes for home. What happens if a guest acts like they own the house? They try to change the furniture, they try to paint the walls, but deep inside they feel restless because that place is not their home. When a human starts to see the world as an eternal home, tightness of the soul begins. At this point, let us make a very important distinction. Tightness of the soul is not always the result of lack of faith. Sometimes it is the opposite, a sign that faith is beginning to wake up, because faith makes the heart more sensitive to the world. Things that did not disturb before start to hurt. Conversations that once felt normal now feel heavy, and the person says, "I was not like this before." Yes, because before the eye of the heart was closed. Now it is beginning to open. That is why seeing this tightness immediately as something to escape from can be a serious mistake, because this tightness can be the call of eternity inside the human being. Animals do not have this kind of tightness. An animal eats and feels full, sleeps and feels rested. When danger passes, it calms down, because the animal is programmed for this world. But a human feels unsatisfied even after eating, feels tired even after resting, feels tight even when everything seems fine. This excess is not a defect. This excess is the result of the human being programmed for the Akhirah. That is why the desire for eternity inside a human is one of the strongest proofs of the existence of Allah, because a limited being cannot desire infinity by itself. This desire was placed inside them. Now here is a very important balance rule. This tightness opens into two paths. Either a person tries to fill this emptiness with the world, or they realize that this emptiness was opened for Allah. The first produces more distress. The second produces surrender. The first tightens the heart even more. The second expands the heart. This is what expansion truly means, not material comfort, but the relief of a heart that has found direction. That is why some people live very hard lives, but say, "My heart is at peace," and others have everything but say, "I am suffocating," because one has found the address of the emptiness inside. The other is still knocking on the wrong doors. At the end of this section, we reach a very critical point. Tightness of the soul is not an enemy to suppress, a disease to run from, a voice to silence. If read correctly, tightness of the soul is a call that leads a human to Allah. Where should a person living with tightness of the soul begin? Do not start fixing things from yourself. Start from the center. That means do not try to change your whole life immediately. Do not try to quit everything at once. Do not say, "From today on, I will be a completely different person." These usually do not last. What truly needs to be done is this: correct the direction of the heart. Because before the heart finds its direction, the will gets tired. Knowledge becomes a burden. Worship turns into empty form. That is why the first step is this awareness. This tightness is not something that pushes me away from Allah. It is a sign calling me to Him. Without this perspective, nothing settles in its place. Do not try to silence the tightness of the soul. Meaning, do not suppress it by keeping yourself constantly busy. Do not cover it with entertainment. Do not pretend like nothing is wrong. Do not create an escape activity every time you feel tight, because every suppressed tightness returns more strongly. It is like a painkiller. It removes the pain, but it does not heal the illness. Tightness of the soul is the same. If it is silenced, it does not change direction, it goes deeper. Take small but continuous steps, not long worship programs, not big life decisions, not forcing yourself to feel good. Instead, short but conscious prayer, little but regular reading, staying with one verse, living while noticing one name of Allah. Because the heart heals not through shock, but through contact. For those who say, "My heart has become very dark." Many people say this, and most of them make the biggest mistake here: despair. A wounded heart can heal. A tired heart can recover. A darkened heart can be illuminated. But a heart that is abandoned, that is the one truly in danger. So the issue is not how dark it has become, but whether it returns or not. If a person is still asking, "Why am I like this?" their heart is still alive. That question is a blessing. Tightness of the soul is not an enemy crushing you. It is a voice calling you home. If a person responds to this voice by drowning it in entertainment, silencing it with heedlessness, trying to fill it with the world, that voice starts to shout. But if a person listens to it, reads it, tries to understand it, that voice turns into a guide. While living with this tightness, do not forget, you were not created for temporary comfort. You were not made to fit into this world. Your heart is tuned for something much greater, and that is exactly why this world sometimes feels tight to you. This is not a defect. This is a reminder